In one of the darkest periods of World War II, the persecution and genocide inflicted upon the Jewish communities by Nazi Germany left an unforgettable mark on the history of humanity. Amidst this painful era, acts of resistance such as the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising stood as shining examples of humanity's hope and determination. Despite the challenging circumstances faced by the Jewish people, their courage and resilience sparked a flame of resistance. This event stands as a rare example representing hope and resistance in a dark chapter of human history. When we hear the word ghetto, the first association that comes to mind is the enforced living areas for Jews throughout history. Indeed, when we examine the etymological and social origins of the ghetto, we see that it had an urban dimension of discrimination against Jews. The first recorded usage of the term dates back to 1516, primarily in cities like Venice and Rome in Italy, where Jews were legally required to live a few blocks away from the city center. In Venice, for example, in the 14th century, the lives of Jews were confined to an area that had once been a gunpowder factory dating back to the 10th century. Furthermore, this confinement was enforced by the state and laws. In other words, as a religious minority, Jews were confined to an underdeveloped part of the city, and their rights regarding the city were violated. The Warsaw and Lodz ghettos stand as the most prominent examples of systematic and comprehensive violence and discrimination against Jews. The Warsaw Ghetto, recognized as the largest among hundreds of ghettos established by the Nazis during the war, housed approximately 400,000 Jews, many of whom were ultimately killed. Today we will confront the historical aspects of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. The Warsaw Ghetto was established in 1940 in Nazi-occupied Poland. The German occupiers transformed the ghetto into a walled and fenced-off area to gather and isolate the Jewish population. Inside the ghetto, the Jewish community struggled to survive under extremely overcrowded conditions, facing hunger, disease, and constant oppression. The daily life in these inhumane conditions created an environment of despair and helplessness. The Jewish community within the ghetto showed resilience in the face of the ruthless persecution and oppression they endured. The roots of resistance began with the formation of underground organizations. The Jewish Labor Bund, led by Mordecai Anielewicz and other underground resistance groups, worked on arming themselves, developing strategies, and establishing communication channels. Weapons and ammunition were collected, underground tunnels were dug, and communication networks were established. The purpose of these preparations was to resist the Nazi attack and secure the freedom of the Jews in the ghetto. On April 9, 1943, the Nazis launched a major operation to completely liquidate the Warsaw Ghetto. But even in the midst of despair, the resistance fighters bravely fought back. They launched attacks on Nazi troops from rooftops, barricades, and tunnels. Violent clashes erupted between the resistance fighters and the Nazi soldiers in the streets. The Nazi forces unleashed heavy artillery against the resistance fighters, setting homes on fire one by one in an attempt to demolish the ghetto. The streets within the ghetto were filled with the determined attacks of the resistance fighters and their courageous resistance against Nazi assaults. The residents of the ghetto began to resist in an organized manner under the leadership of the fighters. Contrary to the occupiers' expectations, the resistance fighters put up a strong defense and fearlessly confronted the German soldiers. Street battles and the struggle within the ghetto persisted for days. Despite the inhumane conditions, the fighters did not lose hope and fought to liberate themselves. Their resistance was fueled not only by weapons but also by hope, determination, and belief. The resilience of the fighters surprised the Nazi soldiers. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising concluded at a great cost. Approximately 13,000 Jewish resistance fighters were killed as a result of the Nazi assault, and the ghetto was completely destroyed. After the uprising, those who survived in the ghetto were sent to concentration camps, where the majority also lost their lives. But this resistance was not only defined by its outcomes. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising represented the will to resist even in the darkest moments, embodying hope and humanity. The uprising had a significant impact worldwide and served as an inspiration in the fight against the Nazi regime. It symbolized the dignity of the Jewish people and their determination to fight for humanity. The resistance was the story of individuals who refused to succumb to Nazi atrocities and held on to hope until their last breath. Remembering and understanding the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising is an important lesson for humanity. It is crucial to never forget the genocide and persecution committed by Nazi Germany and to continue the fight to ensure that such atrocities are never repeated. This resistance represents a significant turning point in human history, showcasing the power of preserving hope and values. The fighters were heroes who refused to surrender to the Nazis and fought for their freedom. The memory of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising will forever serve as an inspiration and symbol of resistance for humanity. In conclusion, ghettos, with a history spanning over 600 years, continue to be a subject of debate in the modern world. Ghettos are areas, especially in urban structures, that are increasingly seen as a reflection of income inequality. These ghettos are perceived as regions where groups, unable to adapt to the mechanisms of capitalism and deprived of equal opportunities, are demonized by emphasizing their illegal aspects. But for some, ghettos have become urban symbols of struggle and resistance since their very existence. Thanks for watching. Until next time.